You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick, and thanks for joining us today. We have Sally Schwarz with us, emeritus professor of radiology, the School of Medicine at Washington University of St. Louis. That's a mouthful, and she's going to add more here because your legacy and everything that you've done and your track record there and beyond is extensive, and your background in the medicine world and the words that come along with it. I don't want to screw that up. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting, actually. And
emeritus, you're still doing projects, but you're retired.
I am retired, yes. I turned 78 this week, so it's pretty amazing to me. It happened like overnight, but yes, I have done a lot in my life. I came here thinking about, talking about the legacy project that I have with the Society of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging, which is SNMMI. But I kind of wanted to talk about my background, where I came from, how I ended up here, and it's been a journey. So I actually was born in Clinton, Iowa. It was a very small town, 26,000 people. And my father was the oldest of 10 children, and they weren't all boys. And then my mother was the youngest of 4 children. She had 3 brothers and herself. And my father's family was German, and they educated all their sons, but the daughters were not educated.
Because around what time would this have been?
My father was born in 1913, so it was a different world, of course, then. But my mother also was a bright woman, and when she also went to high school and earned a full 4-year scholarship to a woman's college in Dubuque, Iowa. And my grandmother would not let her take the award. And so she said to her, "You only need a year of business school. That will be enough for you." And again, my father, of course, went on to college, and he became a pharmacist. So when they got together, I think my mother was angry throughout her life because she wasn't able to do what she wanted to do. And with that said, her daughters, she had 2. My sister lives in Spain, and myself. And so she wanted us to be educated, college educated. And so again, my father had a couple of pharmacies, and it was interesting, how women play into this situation. And so he hired a woman, but he was always grumbling because, well, if she got pregnant, she couldn't work, and on and on. And the rest of the individuals who worked with my dad were, of course, all men. And my father, even after I became a pharmacist, never offered the business to me. So it was just kind of all that era. And I think my mother had a lot of pent-up energy and drive for her daughters. And so I can remember her being, be curious, ask questions, don't stand back. She was involved in my education, and but that was very important to her. And I think, though my father never offered me the business, I think her mind was that I needed to leave Clinton, Iowa, and forge my own way. And so I did go to the University of Iowa. I graduated in pharmacy, and at that time, I'm going to allude to my project. Nuclear pharmacy, radiopharmacy was not even known. There was no such thing that was taught as part of my curriculum in pharmacy school, which was a 5-year program. And so I remember I graduated and I went to work for the Veterans Administration for 2 years. And they had a telex machine, so they'd have little memos coming in. And I read one of them one day, and they were advertising a program at the University of Southern California in radiopharmacy. And I thought, that's interesting. I talked to one of my coworkers who was finishing up his internship, and he said he had applied to the program and he was going to go. I thought, okay, that sounded interesting. I stayed at the VA. I moved then to Colorado for a couple of years. I worked in retail, and I was just not happy. I was actually married and got divorced at that time and decided I wanted to go back to school. And so I wanted to think about hospital pharmacy program, master's program, or this other program that had been advertised at USC. I got on the phone and called my friend because I knew how to reach him, and I said, so what did you think of this curriculum, radiopharmacy? He said, actually, Sally, this is quite an interesting career. I think this whole field is going to just grow, and I think you'd really enjoy it. It was a 12-month program.
What is that? For those of us who don't know what radio pharmacy is, because I'm thinking radio, right? And I'm sure it's not radio on what you have in your car.
Right. This is radioactive pharmaceuticals. And interesting that you asked that question. I mean, everyone does not know what radiopharmacy is. So this was essentially the pharmacist would prepare radioactive pharmaceuticals and would draw up these doses, and they would be injected in humans. And then there were cameras that would essentially look at the radiation that was coming out of the body. And so they would be able to see, depending on what they injected, what pharmaceutical, they would look at the localization, say in the liver or in the lungs or in the colon, and they'd be able to see if there were problems with the process. Also, eventually, they were able to look at like renal imaging, kidney imaging, that they could essentially calculate the how the kidney was working, how it was taking compounds out and excreting them.
And so problems with the process would be, is your body's process working as it should, or if there's a problem, where is that problem?
Right. And when I went to my master's program, the first semester, well, actually the whole year was academic. We had laboratories, so we learned how to handle radioactive materials. And initially, these radiopharmaceuticals were labeled with technetium, which is a single photon emitting isotope. I know that doesn't make sense, but what I wanted to say is at that time, this is in the 1970s, the FDA did regulate that part of nuclear medicine. So it had come along, it had evolved. There were regulations that they could fit. So primarily technetium could be eluted from a generator, and it could be sterile. And the kits are just like you would, like intravenous type of, you'd add saline to them, shake them up, you could drop the dose. Only we would add radioactivity to them and put them in lead so we could handle these. So it was quite a learning experience. But FDA was there, and they could, the cold kits could be determined to be sterile. That was easy.
Yeah, and I think I'm hearing lead. Yes, and my eyes popped open obviously a little bit, because you think lead poisoning and lead's bad. And
now see, what we did is take that glass vial and put it into a container that was lead. So there was no interaction of the solution itself. It was in a glass vial, just like all intravenous vials are glass. And so the septum would be at the top, but the cover would be lead, so you're not handling a radioactive material. You're handling a lead shield.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's wild.
Right, so you went from Clinton, Iowa, to probably a time where, well, maybe even take a step back. Clinton, Iowa, what was it like? I mean, your mom and your dad grew up around there. I have to imagine for women getting an education as she was growing up, that wasn't really a thing. And here she wins the scholarship and she's just allowed to take 1 year. And then as your mom, she's like, you guys get an education, get out of here.
My little tiger. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Was that abnormal or different for the community, the area that you grew up in?
I would say yes. I think that most of my classmates stayed in Clinton, Iowa. But, I graduated with 60 people. It was not a large school. It was a Catholic school, and there was a public school that had probably close to 400 in a year graduating, because we're baby boomers.
Right.
There were a lot of us. But a lot of these people stayed in Clinton, Iowa, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, as time has progressed, these small communities are disappearing because there are no jobs in these small towns, So it's my mother had foresight in the sense that she encouraged us to leave and go to some place larger that we could do more with the education that we received. And she was supportive of me when I went back to school at the University of Southern California.
Right, because you could have said, I'm going to stay in retail as a pharmacist,
yes.
And this is great, and I'm living a good life, yet you, I guess, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but wanted more. You were still curious.
Well, I think that's the point. I think, for me, when I think about my mother and choosing a career, and pharmacy ended up being the choice, but I also really enjoyed chemistry. This was something that I really liked. And going through college, I liked pharmacology too. So how does the body operate, and so this particular science, nuclear medicine, was about both of those things. So it was about chemistry, formulating compounds. The ones for clinical use were very straightforward and simple, but there's the research side of that business too. And I was introduced to that. We were, as one of our projects, we had to write an investigational new drug application, an IND. And so we had to find a compound in the literature, and then essentially it was make-believe, because we were just going to determine, what did this compound do, what kind of toxicology testing did we need, all of these things. So that's what we had put together as part of our project. And I was very interested overall in both of those things. And so what I did while I was finishing up this year is I applied for PhD programs at 3 universities. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do more. So, I can remember I didn't finish the applications because I still wasn't sure that this career was what I wanted to do. So one morning, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, I was getting ready to go out and run, and my phone rang. And I picked up the phone, and this person said, "This is Mike Welch. Why didn't you finish your application?" I thought, well, I was honest. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't awake. So I said, well, I just don't know that this is what I want to do with my life. He said, well, think about this. Maybe you could work half-time in clinical nuclear medicine, half-time in research, radiochemistry. And then after a year, you could make a decision. Okay, that sounds interesting. And he hung up the phone. He said, before he hung up, call my secretary and make an appointment to come out and interview. So I thought, okay. So I went for my run and came back, and I did. I made the appointment, and I came to St. Louis, Washington University. And when I was flying, I was sitting next to a man on the plane, and as we were descending, he said, "You're not going to like it here." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, it's not like Los Angeles." I said, "I was born in Iowa." "Oh, well then I guess maybe you'll like it." Okay. So it was humorous. I went and interviewed. Barry Siegel was the director of nuclear medicine at the time, and I interviewed with him and also with Michael J. Welch, who is a world-renowned chemist, radiochemist. And so I decided I would move to St. Louis. So I had a little yellow Volkswagen Bug, and I drove myself back to Denver, picked up things that I had left in Fort Collins, actually, and then came on to St. Louis and began working for Mike Welch for a couple of years, and also working in clinical nuclear medicine. The interesting thing about Washington University is there's always new things on the horizon. Well, at that time, clinical nuclear medicine, and then there was a door, and the other end of the hall was the research area and the laboratories. And actually, they were in process of developing a PET scanner. Now, a PET scanner is a positron-emitting radionuclide, so PET, P-E-T, and they're actually developing this scanner in the research area. So there were physicists ongoing all the time, and they did develop the scanner, and it was marketed. But it was for me a huge learning experience. For one thing, I had never done research. I learned how to, essentially I was brought in to work on radioactive materials that would be injected typically in some kind of animal, maybe rats or dogs sometimes, and imaged under the old type of camera. But it was very interesting work. So keeping going forward, I was there for a couple of years, and then...
Well, I was going to say, he said, just try it for a year. Sounds like you went longer than a year.
Right. I was there for 2 years, and then I still decided I had passed some of the exams I needed for the PhD program, and then I decided that I was just not sure. So I had met this individual, Tom Schwarz, and he had seen the things that I did in my home, clothing-wise, and in, just making throw pillows and all these things. And he said to me, why don't you just open a store at, he had a place where he stored plants and nothing else was going on there. So I could take it over and produce women's clothes. And that was not off the wall. It was something that I had also been very interested in. I sewed all through high school. I loved it. I took a couple of, in pharmacy school you can take about 2 or 3 courses of electives. That's it. And I did take a sewing course, just to learn more details. And then I always was thinking. I had a woman actually in Clinton, Iowa. I'd buy Vogue patterns, and she'd make whatever I wanted. And she was an amazing seamstress. So I knew it was all possible. And I also got in touch with a friend of Tom's, Margie McElroy. She was an individual who'd been in the business in New York City. And she was working for a company and spending time overseas, maybe 6 months over there and then 6 months in New York, back and forth. They had production facilities over in China. So she was tired of it all. Her mom was sick, and she moved back to St. Louis, was going to. And so we worked together. And it was truly, it was great. But we have no capital to back us. And so I was not aware of how to pursue that kind of money. And but we put together a line of pants, and my parents had retired, and they were out Palm Springs. And so we went out to California, and we actually marketed our clothing. We had I had a friend who was a beautiful painter, and she would paint birds and flowers on. We worked with antique clothing as well, so old tuxedo shirts, and she would paint them. And it was amazing. And she also painted fabrics that she brought to me, and I would make garments. She told me what she wanted, and then I would make them. So it was really great, except that I didn't make any money. And So it was, I decided after 5 years that it was time to go back to my other profession.
So you really took a pause.
I did.
In
Yes.
your first love.
Yes.
Pharmacology and chemistry. And
Mm-hmm. So, and all of that came back to me, and I decided, well, I'd call my old technical boss at Washington University, and I said, do you think you could use a nuclear pharmacist? He said, tomorrow would be fine. I said, okay, how about the 1st of March? I had just had a baby in December, and so I said, yes, I can do that. And it was just amazing. I went back and I worked, when I had a second child too, so Amy and Sarah, and they were old enough that I could go back to work full time. So Sarah was 2 and Amy was 4. So
you'd been out of that industry. There's many women who take a step back or pause on a career, and it can either be hard to go back to what they were doing or hard to get back into the professional world.
Right. How did I do that after
you
5
call
years?
And it's like tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, for those who, what do you think attributed to that? How were you able to do that? What advice for anybody who's in that position? How did that come to be?
Well, I think I have a lucky star. But no, I think, things hadn't changed real dramatically. I knew they had moved in the areas where they were working. I came in and I understood that I had established a process in those 2 years that I was there, and things had changed, but I found a place where I could be useful. And then after 2 years, when I came back full time, I went back to work for Mike Welch. And so again, I was able to work on research, radiopharmaceuticals, and it was interesting. We were working with antibodies. One was for colorectal carcinoma detection, and it had been developed by a woman at Jewish Hospital, Judith Conant, and it was, so we were going to take this product into humans, and we had to submit an IND, which is what I had done in graduate school. So again, and these things, again, were amazing. You just have to do it, come back and face what is new and different and learn and grow. And it was very interesting because when I came back, Mike Welch had just lost a graduate student, postdoc. So he said, okay, you're going to take this class, teach this class. You're going to do this IND with this investigator. And I thought, okay. And it was as though I hadn't been gone for 5 years, but I had been.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, right, you had the skills.
Yes.
Yes, you hadn't done it for several years, but if you were just to plain look at the basics,
right.
You had all of them
right.
still. Sure, some things had changed,
yes.
But again, going back to the basic building blocks, you had those. You took the chance. You made the call. You could have just sat at home and not done that, waited for somebody to come to you. So you took that risk, reached out to somebody, and jumped in and said, sure, things might be a little bit different, but knowing my track record, I've always been successful. I'll figure this out. Sounds like.
Right. And I had actually, just before I went back to work, filled in at St. Louis University for the pharmacist who was on maternity leave. So I had 6 months while she was gone. And then also I called a commercial radiopharmacy, and I mentioned that I was looking for work. They said, well, actually, we need a pharmacist to fill in to train some of our people. So I did a couple of 3-week sessions there. So I had kept my fingers in towards the end, again, getting back into the but it's because I wanted to do this. It wasn't because somebody came and asked me. I had to call, ask questions. is this something that's possible? Because I didn't know if it would be. I wanted to also say this was a shirt I designed, was part of my clothing business, which is, again, a backwards business. But so as we go forward, and I'm working full time, I was also involved with another organization. It's called the ISRS, International Society for Radiopharmaceutical Sciences. And this was an international group. So it would meet every other year in Europe or in Asia or in the United States. And Mike Welch was adamant about his postdocs, his graduate students. They had to travel. They had to, because again, this is a very small field, even worldwide. So again, he had graduate students from other countries. And so as a result, I met and became friends with a lot of people. And so I had, as my career moved forward in nuclear medicine, still belonging to the SNMMI, Society for Nuclear Medicine, Molecular Imaging. I did both of these routinely. And as things went forward, now we're talking about the possible development of PET radiopharmaceuticals that are going to be coming into use. So I had seen those kind of from the beginning of my coming to Washington University. And so here we are. It's going to possibly be put into humans, and then it was. The radiopharmaceutical was FDG, which you may or may not ever have heard of it, but it's fluorodeoxyglucose. So it's a sugar that if you put it in the body intravenously, it will locate in certain types of tumors, breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer. So again, we were able to do research on humans, with the investigational IND in place. And so, and then as we were moving along in the 90s, this became utilized at many academic institutions across the United States. And insurance companies were reimbursing for these studies. And with that said, the FDA got very interested in PET because the insurance companies were reimbursing, so they needed to be involved. So what they decided in 1995 was that they would, just like they had done with traditional nuclear medicine, they would put us under stable drug, good manufacturing practice. Well, the problem was fluorine-18, FDG, this is a sugar that's been added, that fluorine has been added into the sugar, has a 110-minute half-life. So how can you check sterility? Sterility takes 2 weeks to accomplish. Well, they can't do it. And so when they posted the rule saying that we had to comply with that, with the regulation that we couldn't comply with, we pushed back. And this was the community at large. This was the United States community. And it was from, so then we had to get a senator involved from Alaska who went to the Congress and essentially backed our need. And at the time, I think it was 1997, Bill Clinton signed the requirement that the FDA develop new drug GMP regulations for PET drugs. This was huge, 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 huge. So what that meant was that this was 97. We started with the FDA in 90. We had workshops at numerous places. And so when this was worked out, because the FDA didn't understand radioactive pharmaceuticals, these short-lived pharmaceuticals. So then they began to write law. We finally got final rule in 2012.
Wow. So from
95.
started 90 and then to 95
Right.
and then to 2012.
Right. So you can't, it took them forever. but we had a lot of work to do anyway. This was something that, FDG came out of chemistry laboratories, kind of not thinking about necessarily. They may have had a radiopharmacist working there, but I was fortunate at Washington University. We had the first medically installed cyclotron, but that was in, let me think, probably the 60s installed in the United States. But and a cyclotron is what makes the radioactivity. So all of these PET radiopharmaceuticals, the isotopes are made on a cyclotron. The other source of radioactive materials is a reactor. We have one in Columbia, Missouri, and they're actually going to open a second one, and that has to do with more therapeutic direction of radionuclides. But so here we were, and since I belong to the Society of Nuclear Medicine, Molecular Imaging, and all this was going forward, they asked me to give talks about what kind of applications we had to submit, and what did we need to achieve. So it was really quite an interesting time, and I worked with our engineer at Washington University, Greg Gailey, and he and I were able to develop a new location. So we took us out of the old cyclotron facility, that was definitely needing updating. And so we went and moved to another building and installed a new cyclotron there and equipment that was required to do quality control for humans. So it was a very big step forward. And we opened that in 2001. So again, we were kind of ahead of the curve. We were getting to where we needed to be. And all of these things, and at the society, it was interesting too. And this is because I had met people in all these different countries. They too were doing the same thing. They were putting FDG forward as an entity for their clinical use as well. So I was invited to Japan. I visited 5 cities there. I went to Korea, did the same. I went to Thailand and gave a talk on this kind of regulation. And I remember arguing with an Italian about regulation and what he thought versus what I thought. And then, I was invited over to the opening of a PET center in Italy.
How did that argument go with the Italian? I like how you're like, I was just arguing with an Italian.
Well, it was in front of an audience, all the speakers were there. And I said, well, we have to wait to see what, the FDA decides. But this is the way I feel it should go. So, and it was interesting. And then in Korea, they were actually going to be following the European regulations, which were slightly different than ours, but they still wanted me to come and look at what they had and make recommendations. I knew some of the people in the laboratories. And I also, went to, as part of SNMMI, I did audits in Belarus as well. This was right before the major turmoil in Belarus. My family did not want me to go. I had to go through all these questions for the government, about where I should stay, what I shouldn't do. I had to complete all of this before I could go into Belarus. And it was an unbelievable experience.
So I'm sitting here, sort of listening to your story and all these places you've gone, and I'm thinking, Clinton, Iowa. Her mom tells her to get out, even the travel and the getting out and the curiosity, because that certainly seems to be the theme for you and maybe one of the core values. Yet chemistry, nuclear, radio, these are big things, these are heavy things. How does Sally, I imagine little girl in Clinton, even settle on, this is what I'm going to do?
Right. I know. It was, I feel very fortunate to have done what I did. It was amazing. When I was at the University of Southern California, I remember I was the 10th graduating class, and there were 10 students per year. So I was in the 100th graduate class, and what the FDA, or excuse me, the VA was doing was trying to man all of their sites with individuals from this program. So they had offered scholarship for the tuition, which was a lot of money for me. So when I applied for it and got it, I was thrilled. So, but yes, you think of all this. So this is an evolution that began, for me, when I graduated from college, when I actually heard about radiochemistry, radiopharmaceuticals at the University of Southern California. And then not to be afraid of it, but to think, maybe I would like to do this. Because I had, as you say, always liked chemistry. So it's just how life has a way of understanding, if you are open to opportunity, that you say yes. And that was something that I was asked a lot of times to do things. And as I mentioned, my family didn't want me to do it. But you know what? I said, I have to do this. It's something that's important. And, I met a person there at Belarus that was managing this operation as well as working in a college of pharmacy. And so it was a bit scary. As I left there, you only have so many hours that you can spend in Belarus under the visa, and then you have to be gone. So I was making my exit on time. But it was, and the people were poor people. I mean, it was, the party was running the more lucrative parts of the city. So it was a scary situation. So, but I was part of the IAEA because I was president of the Society of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging.
And also, as you're telling your story, it sounds to me like so much of this potentially doesn't happen if you're not part of these groups, if you're not out beyond your immediate circle.
Correct. And that was one thing that I think Mike Welch did very well. He was, having graduate students from other countries and encouraging you. We knew these people. They were our friends, and going to these meetings, we'd see them again, after they finished college or university, their PhDs. And I would stay in touch with all these people. And Mike had a significant interaction with the people in Japan. Copper 64 was a nuclide they were both very interested in. And it was, he encouraged that kind of travel. And so it was automatic when I was asked to go to Belarus that, of course, I would go. And I would do what they asked. They asked me to go also to South America, but I had obligations, so I couldn't go. And I thought, well, I hope you ask me again. And they did, to go to Belarus.
Yeah, I was just running this morning, listening to a book, How Women Rise, and they were talking about, women especially will sometimes get into a role and think, okay, I need to learn everything about this role because I need to be a perfectionist and have all the skills first. And that's actually not what you should probably do. You should say, okay, who are the people I need to know and meet to be good in this role, to be good in this position.
Right.
And so as you were talking, it made me think about that. Like, who are the people outside of this immediate group, in this immediate group and outside, that I need to meet and get to know and learn from and build my network so that all of these events and these opportunities come your way that just create more opportunities.
Yes.
That you can imagine.
I agree. I mean, and I think you can't stop thinking. You have to, encourage your mind to keep thinking, how can I go forward with this? When I was asked to run for the Society of Nuclear Medicine presidency, and as I mentioned, I was the fourth president, considering that organization had been initiated in 1965, that I would be the fourth only woman, first pharmacist. So, you think about that, and it is a man's world, but there is a place for every woman who wants to try, to make it work. I mean, and, I don't think that was ever part of my mindset. I really felt like what I needed to do was a good job always. What I wanted to do was, make our facility work very well. We needed our standard operating procedures, our batch records, our policies, everything. I had to put those in line, because when I took over managing FDG, I volunteered to take over FDG oversight in 1995. And there was a big changeover at Washington University, and I thought, the person who was doing it was a PhD who was not interested at all in this clinical entity. I said, I'll do this, and he's, okay. They let me do that. And not only did they let me do that, they let me manage all of the research radiopharmaceuticals that were currently being made. We made a lot of them. We even made radioactive water, which is still made, So again, but it was something that all of what we did, Washington University was a big focal point. Mike Welsh was very good at getting grants, very good at having students, and those students moved out, and they now are established in California, in Colombia, in all across the United States, MSKCC in New York. It's really incredible that a man has had such an impact on this field, and though he, I asked him that question one time, and he screamed at me, "Why don't you know that?" And I stopped, and I went out in the other room, quickly wrote down what he said, and thought, I'm never asking him that question. I mean, I know how I have to approach him differently. Not that I wouldn't ever do it, but it had to be differently.
Yeah, so that story. So were you in a class? Were you in a lab? What were you?
I just walked into his office to ask him a question about what I was doing. So it was, yes, just the way he was. He was very abrupt with people, and so you kind of had to realize that, he was a character for certain. And
it sounds as though, because he was the one who called you,
yes,
at 6 a.m.
Yes.
And convinced you,
right,
to kind of maybe adapted so that you would come out.
Right.
And you came out, but had a huge impact in your life and your career from a mentorship standpoint, opening the world.
Many doors.
To you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really, and as I don't want to forget to talk about my project that I have initiated when I was president of SNMMI. They ask you to create a project as the president. Well, I'd been working on a training program prior to that point. I was finishing my presidency in 2017, and I decided that I would launch not actually launch, but I would put that project forward. So I have developed a training program to train pharmacists and chemists, bachelor's or master's chemists, in the release of PET radiopharmaceuticals, what's necessary. And so I've put together 50 lectures. I have had people, all different types of people, but to look at the background needed, physics, the chemistry, radiochemistry, the pharmaceutical, several pharmaceutical presentations on uptake. And then additionally, I had physics. Then after all of those didactics, then we went on to the regulatory. We talk about all the regulations that you need to know and understand as part of this total 50 lectures. Once a person signs up for the course, it's $1,500 to take the course. They take little quiz, 5-6 questions at the end of each lecture. And then once they're completed, then they can apply for the hands-on training. And so right now we've had a long road, but we finally have our first two memorandum of understandings written by academic institution. University of Michigan and Washington University have now, and University of Pennsylvania is right behind. And we're looking at expanding. We have a couple of commercial groups that are interested too. So the hands-on piece is a 4-week course that you learn gloving, gowning, all the appropriate media fill testing, which you have to demonstrate you're able to handle materials in a sterile manner. And so this kind of training, as well as observing the radiochemist and in the quality control laboratory, all the tests that are required to release, and there's about 7-8 tests that have to be performed before you can release it for human injection, because you can't determine that this product is sterile because it takes 2 weeks. So, but anyway,
and they don't have this training?
Pardon?
Like, I would have thought this training would be standard or would already be out there.
No, it's not. And so I'm trying to, I think about 100 people that have signed up for the didactic. We have 5 that have finished, so they have to complete it and are waiting for institutions to do the hands-on training. But right now, what we have managed is that the Society of Nuclear Medicine is actually funding 5 students a year. It's $8,000 for the 1-month tour of duty at the academic or the commercial group. And then so that they are able to fund 5 students for 2 years in a row. So we've got 10 students covered at this point in time. So, and the other possibility is the ERF, which is the Education Research Foundation. It works with the Society of Nuclear Medicine, and I'm trying to get them to come up with a way that they can provide money for the extra things, say housing and transportation for students that want to come to these places that are not their hometowns. So again, it would be, I'm excited about the fact that this is finally feeling like it's moving forward.
So you're retired but not retired.
Yeah, it's kind of a family joke that I certainly I have 2 grandchildren here in town, Charlie and Felix. So. And then my daughter in London has 2 children, also a boy and a girl, Noah and Lara. So Charlie is my oldest. She's 7. And so I get to see Charlie and Felix. He's turning 4 in May. And so it makes, I still spend my time with them too. But this particular week is a busy week, and I do less. So, but I still am employed, sort of.
It's a lifelong.
It is.
Just drilled into you. It's in your fibers of curiosity and creating and doing.
Correct. And I think the thing, as you mentioned, surprising that this doesn't exist already. Yes, but that's kind of the way things are. You are surprised when you realize that, why has this not ever happened before? Well, no one ever really pushed hard enough to get it accomplished. So that's what I'm trying. Before I give up, I want it to be functional.
But I think sometimes in life, right, we're so busy and we go, that it takes a moment, whether it's working on ourselves, developing ourselves, or coming up with a new process or a new
right.
business line or business or whatever it might be. Often it's those moments where we just stop and pause. It could be in the shower, and all of a sudden we have this moment, this aha, that we fill a void where we're like, why hasn't anybody done this before?
Right. It's really true. And my husband, Tom Schwarz, who is the person who introduced me to you,
right?
Is always that thinker, and he's my unusual person that I've known for seems like my whole life, but that's not true. But he's been very instrumental and always willing to let me do whatever I wanted to do. I'm encouraged that there's never been, I've never felt guilty for doing what I do, and he's always there to do what is necessary. But no one talks about this. It just is the way it is. So I feel very lucky because I know a lot of women struggle to have spouses that are helpful. And I remember that I have to tell this little story. I traveled to Canada to a meeting, and Tom was home with the girls. And of course, Amy had a headache, and she couldn't, he couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And so he said to her, okay, you need to just call this number and make an appointment for you to come in. So he told Amy that. So she got the appointment. And I called home to say my plane was delayed, and Sarah gets on the phone. She starts crying. She says, Mom, Amy's in the hospital and she's got meningitis. So that was the end result. And and her grandma's standing behind her, and she says, you weren't supposed to say that. So, but it was, he's always there. And he had to go to the hospital, to the emergency room, and, while they were doing spinal taps, well, he is not, he doesn't like that job. He does not, it's just, he is not want to observe his children in distress. So, or generally, he's not a medical person.
Right. That's a good way of putting it. And I was going to say that you mentioned, the mom guilt. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be very difficult. And many, many women go through that when they have a career and or they have a very challenging and demanding career. You've gone, I imagine, very demanding career and a career, I'm guessing, with mostly men.
Yes, absolutely.
I found that men don't often understand what women go through. So their expectation of what you should be doing at the office or whichever is based on their life.
Their life. Yes, that's true. That is true. And I've been extremely lucky to have a husband who is, very supportive of me and whatever I do. And, he has traveled with me overseas. During the presidency, I did a lot of traveling, and it was very rewarding to me too, but he enjoyed it as well. He's a homebody. So, one trip a month is what he could possibly manage. So, it was, sometimes he wouldn't go with me, but, it was just the positive person in a husband is great. I couldn't have done it without an individual like him, because I couldn't have done all of it.
It makes a huge difference.
Yes.
And I find myself often thinking of the kids and what they think or how they're impacted. And I've had them often tell me, no, Mom, it's a great thing. Like, I've been more independent than my friends ever could be. I see you working so hard. How
Exactly.
has that been with, and I have a boy and two girls, so it's also important for my son to see that.
Yes.
You have two girls.
Yes.
How has that been as a mom of two girls?
And it was, they missed me, but, they weren't negative. When they got a little older, I would take them with me. Well, Sarah particularly, she's my youngest. But, it was, I brought also this field into their school. I took them to work, the students. I took them to work and walked them through, how we operate, how you define, using cells, using animals, using, the chemicals. I mean, we worked through it, so I had, I think it was educational for them, and hopefully maybe down the line somewhere, maybe, that they too would be interested in a field like this. But, I had a physician come in and talk about what they were doing, took them to see a reading room, it was really a good experience. I think my children, obviously when my daughter got sick, she wanted her mom, but her dad did a great job. I came home and went to the hospital, and then I picked up from there, so it was, it was just, I think it was tough. They didn't ever say that they, were, my oldest daughter was in acting. She moved to London and she got a master's in Birmingham, and then went and started living in London. So, and she's enjoyed her life. She's, and my younger daughter is a nurse. So she decided after working for a couple of years to go back and get her PhD in nursing because she wanted to work in research. And her, it was, so again, each of them has had interesting careers. And I hope that I was a good influence on both of them.
So I'm curious, we talk about your husband and your kids. What about your dad? Seeing where you've gone, what you've done, and he didn't want to hire women.
Right.
Never thought about, you and the family business.
Right.
What has he thought about where you've gone with all of this? And
well, he was, I think, very excited about who I had become. He passed away. I had a lot of jobs in my tenure at Washington University. I was on the United States Pharmacopoeia. I was on the Nuclear Regulatory Advisory Commission. I was, I've done a lot of different things. And most recently, I received the Ron Evans Award at Washington University, which talks about your overall career in service to the university, to radiology. And I gave a talk, and then one of my father's partners is still alive. He's 92, and he's still absolutely mentally intact, and still plays golf. I just called him the other day, but he said to me, "Your father would have been extremely happy with what you've done." And I thought, and that touched me, because not wanting to have women, in the pharmacy career, but I was able to do just that, to have a career, and radiopharmaceuticals were something new and different, but definitely exciting for me.
Yeah, and your mom then to push you.
Yeah, that was, and the funny thing about my mother was she absolutely wanted me to get this degree. And then when I wanted to kind of go back to graduate school, she was helpful, supportive. And while I had my sojourn back to my clothing business, I expected her not to be happy, but she came and, and she thought that was okay too. And then I went back to my profession, and it blossomed. So I feel like I was able to sort through a number of things, and it took a number of years to do that, and determination to do that, because again, that design influence was always something I had wanted to do, always, but I couldn't do it. I had to become a pharmacist first. And then I had to put it on hold for a while and do other things, and then proceed to succeed at my career.
I mean, through the decades of your career,
Yes.
a lot changed. Right?
Absolutely.
Not only in technology and just the world in general, but also women in business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Women out, outside the home.
Yes, it is a huge change. And what's interesting too, I went to the annual meeting of the SNMMI last June, and I just felt the energy that was there, because now there's a lot of startup companies moving into the radiotherapeutics, and it's amazing. They're bringing money into this business. And I think there is a radiotherapeutic for prostate cancer, and it always had to be administered after the patient failed chemotherapy. This past summer, the FDA allowed that radiotherapeutic to be administered as first line. So this is something that was very exciting, thinking about it's a new field and could positively help a lot of individuals. So again, we've gone from no input in radio in pharmacy to, and now we're seeing for pharmacists who round with physicians, MSKCC at the Ohio State University, there are pharmacists that round with the physicians in therapy situations, and they can talk about the types of radioactive therapies, and again present, as in traditional medicine, pharmacists have always rounded in the hospitals with the physicians. So we're getting one step closer. It's just, it's exciting, it's really something to think about. So to keep, and I know pharmacy overall is changing rapidly, but you can change too.
And, think about, again, young girl, Clinton, Iowa, going to California. You've been in Colorado. You're here in St. Louis that you're not going to like. And from the guy on the airplane, a lot of different moving around in pharmacy, trying different things, learning a lot of different things internationally, right. Traveling to all these different countries and giving talks and being the president of these organizations. Obviously, a lot of success. What things do you think were part of that success, that if somebody were looking in and seeing all that, they'd say, okay, what can I take from that? What can I learn? How can I apply some of that to my career and be successful?
I think about moving specifically to the presidency, and I remember, there were a group of individuals, and they were radiochemists. There also was a radiopharmacist, and actually 2 radiopharmacists. So it was a group effort that, they were absolutely interested in moving me forward as this candidate for the presidency, and they backed me too. They were, right behind me. I think that, you need to look at what you want and do the best job that you can do, and stick up for what is right in your mind. And if things happen to you, then maybe you have to adjust a little bit. Maybe you don't get something, but don't stop. Rethink and try again. I think that there are ways to do things, and nothing has to be the way it is. There's always other ways that you can try to do things, and I think that it's incredibly important to think outside the box, to think about not how is it done, how do you want to do it? And I think that maybe I got that from my mother, or probably 100% got that from my mother, but, she didn't get to do what she wanted, but her children were going to do what she wanted. And so she had the first say in that regard. At least she had a child that was willing to, okay, fine, I'll do what you want, But you really have to keep that kind of energy front and center, and don't give up just because it wasn't. I know of a friend of mine who applied, ran for a certain position, and she didn't get it, and then she doesn't want to do it again. But you can't be like that. You have to realize you're going to fail. It isn't going to be just a straight line. It's going to take its own path, and you have to be ready to follow that path and move forward. Don't just get stuck because somebody told you no. Find another way. There are other ways. It's just, I think as I, kind of, if I ever really retire, it is something that I think about, certainly. It's important to keep going somehow to make your life, better.
Anything you've learned, obviously those are, great things. These are things to do. And in those regards, it comes up that these are things don't do.
Right.
But maybe there's some things you did not mention in that. There's like, ooh, make sure you don't do this, or make sure you don't fall into this trap. That would be different or outside of what you just said.
When I left Washington University, I was not met with open arms when I came back. With certain people, yes, but not with all. I had one individual who was not happy with me. And by the end of my career, I received an award from him. So it is really true that you won't make everyone happy. And you have to keep going in the direction that you think is good for you. And maybe it takes a bit. It's not that you can just, you just have to remember that if this is something you need to do, I think in my own mind that my fashion design was something that I wanted to do. That's from when I was, in high school. I don't know that was ever verbalized because I certainly knew my mother wouldn't agree with it. And because I was kind of one of the pharmacist's wives were in art, design, and I liked that. And I could see my mother backing me away from it, But all my life I could do that for myself, The opportunity that I did it for more than myself was great, but I didn't know how to. I was thinking of Maxine, and I was thinking of how she knows how to get money for Build-A-Bear. And I thought I didn't have that understanding of how to progress and who I could contact and who might be interested, So I stopped that and went back to the career that I knew that I liked and went forward. So again, I think that you just need to, and in today's world, things are so different that you just have to spend some time thinking about what you want and how you can get there. And if it doesn't work, try a different way. I really do think that I'm kind of a conglomeration of interests, and I think all of us are to an extent, and you just have to focus on. For me, I also needed something that would make money, and I chose the more direct route, which was a career in nuclear pharmacy. So I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, you certainly, sometimes we need that pause, we need that break to remind us what we really are passionate about, or it just gives us that energy and drive to pour back in.
Right. That is true. That is true. It's been, I feel for me, my life has been what I wanted it to be. It's happy, it's productive, and I have a wonderful husband and 2 wonderful daughters, and I really can't ask, and 4 grandchildren. I can't ask for more. So, I mean, it's that effort pays off. And I think, this is something that's interesting to me too. I mean, I was an older mother, obviously, and in a time when all of my friends are probably a good 10 years younger than me now. And I think that more women were having children later, but maybe that will change too. I don't know. But, it is possible. It works. If you wait to have children, it's okay. And I think that you just have to decide, what do you want? Where do you want to go? If now isn't the right time to have children, well, then wait. Or, you want to have them in the beginning and then you want to work out your life after. Options, I would say, are limitless, sort of limitless. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like, having somebody, your mother certainly believed in you, pushed you, and from that, from what I can tell, you believed in yourself, and you took risks. You knew what you liked and you enjoyed, and when something was put on the plate that sounded interesting, I'm going to try that. I'm going to look into that.
Right. You
kept a network so that when you heard about your friend in California, you reached out and said, what do you think about that? I'm going to go try that.
Right.
You learned something new. You knew you were all about curiosity and learning. You were also knew who you were and you were honest. You got that call at 6 a.m. and you said, well, I'm just not sure I want to do this. And so he was able to say, well, we'll try this. And you went on out and you came to St. Louis, WashU, and you gave it a shot. You found more support from your husband, and your girls fit in there. You had support from the team. They supported you when you came back. But again, all along the way, saying, there's an opportunity, I might as well try it. Here's a place to learn. I'm going to jump on that. Here's something new at WashU. I'm going to become a part of that. Sort of raising your hand and just jumping in.
Yes.
And taking those opportunities, and then becoming part of a larger community outside of St. Louis, and jumping in and giving speeches and going to Belarus and all of those things that you were raising your hand, taking risks, opportunities, staying true to yourself, knowing yourself, being curious, thinking outside the box, learning. And when you were talking earlier, your path, even geographically, wasn't linear. No. And what an interesting, successful career from all you've been able to do and learn and see. And you're still not stopping. So much we can all learn from that. And you're still going. So much to learn from.
I think having a career, keeps you motivated, and for me, that career was varied, and yet I think it was always figuring out things that I had thought about, from the beginning, and it really was. Every place I went, it was a learning experience, and you take away the best of what you are seeing, and I can't believe that, you think. I have done a lot of traveling. I was invited to Amsterdam to give a talk at the opening of their pet center. I was invited to view in Italy another pet center there. It's just been, I think I'm a positive kind of person. I think that at least I try to be. Certainly there are days when I'm not. But the world is an interesting place. When you leave the presidency of SNMMI, all of a sudden as a scientist, they're not really interested in you. The physicians, they keep around a little bit longer, because they can be active and help raise money and, things like that. But I knew this was the way it was. When I was leaving the convention center in Denver, Colorado, when I was my presidential meeting, and I opened up the door, and there were other individuals in there. They were taking pictures, and they hadn't even asked to include me. And I thought, I guess they think I'm finished. So that with the society, I was finished. But you know what? It kept on going. There were things that didn't end there. There was still more to come. And you have to not look at the negative. You have to look at the positive. It's easy to look at the negative. And I think that don't let yourself go there, because why? It doesn't help you. I think if you look and find a way to continue doing whatever it is you want to do, that's the important thing. Not feeling sorry for yourself, because no one else is going to feel sorry for you. So I think that you need always in your life to think about that. Stay positive and look for where you can go, next. And it works. It may not work all the time, but it works. And I think that it's something that as women, we really need to remember. And, if your job changes, you don't have to stay there. You can go to something else. And it may take you a while to find something that you like, maybe even 5 years. But it will, it's going to help you sort things out, and just don't give up. Don't give up. I think it's very important to stay positive and to believe in yourself, because you're a special person. Every one of us is a special person. Every one of us has things that we can give and do. And you can't forget that. You just have to find out what they are. Where do you want to go?
It may take a pause for a few years.
Yeah,
to find that
exactly.
And for those who may want to keep track of what you're up to and how the project is going, and if you ever retire, we don't know. Is there a way they can keep track of you or find what you're up to? Are you out there on LinkedIn or on WashU or any of these sites?
I am on LinkedIn. I don't check it all the time, but I do. I'm still doing consulting, so I am interested to keep going. And I'm going to University of Pennsylvania in March. So, I recently went to the University of Columbia, so in November. So it's just, you have to go and look at what they have and stay present. And I think for me, I am on Facebook too, but I don't really post. I just kind of respond to people. I am on there, but I'm just a little more leery of putting things on Facebook than I used to be.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today and sharing so much. It's interesting. We all have a special story, and we all have something that someone will connect with and someone will learn from. And maybe it's just, man, I've heard that before, but I just needed to hear it one more time.
Yep.
So that I can believe in myself, or I can trust myself, or that risk I was not sure I should take. That was the universe telling me, take it, believe in myself. So thank you for sharing your story of learning, curiosity, believing in yourself, betting on yourself, and just, again, giving us more wisdom and, just that positive energy to go forth in our own stories.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's a great opportunity, and I truly appreciate being able to tell my story.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit sheliftproject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.